Hi, my name is Ona and I work for Aspen Adult Services. We are a non-profit that assists people with disabilities in two main areas: supported employment and supported living. One of the things that we love to do best at Aspen is to connect people with resources. And today we're kicking off a series of public service announcements that does just that. Our first one is on our friend Nancy McVean, who has made a career out of counseling persons with disabilities. If you'd like to reach Nancy, the best way to do that is through our office at Aspen, area code 406-422-0859. And if you'd like more information about Aspen, please check us out at www.aspenadultservices.org. Remember to give us a thumbs up. Thank you.
I'm Nancy McVean. I'm an LCPC and an MHPP, which is a mental health professional. I work with seriously mentally ill adults and intellectually disabled and developmentally disabled adults.
So you're a counselor for
I am.
people with disabilities.
Yes.
Okay. How did you get started in that?
When I first went to I was employed by the Mental Health Center back in the 80s, and I went to Helena Industries to teach a class in sex education, and discovered that even though the material came from the Trick Library, which was for developmental disabilities, our program was not tailored to the population we were working with. They were a lot of fun, there were a lot of mistakes made, and they just kind of rolled with it. And I think I had 7 or 8 clients in that first group. So then eventually I ended up going back and running groups for some of the clients from that program, and just followed up and did a lot of individual work through the group homes and the other agencies.
So when you started your career, was this your focus at that time, or did this kind of just morph into this?
No, when I started my career, I was going to wear suits and high heels and have a secretary, somebody that scheduled my appointments. I was never dreamed I was going to work in this field. And it just rolled that way and became an interest and a passion. A lot of it really was from the support that I received from the staff at these agencies, who collaborated, information, they helped, they kept me up to date on some of the difficulties, behavior difficulties, mental health difficulties. And so every time I walked in, it was like having a team there, and it was so much more rewarding than to work with somebody just every few weeks and not know what's been going on.
You tell people who are disabled, or people who are the parent of a disabled person, how do they go about getting a counselor for the person in their life?
Well, I think that you would want to sort of screen your counselor. You can call a counselor and sort of screen them for what their interest and their expertise is in. And remember that the person with a disability will often need sessions closer together. It's hard sometimes to retain what they learned or what their progress is. And you have to be a little bit flexible, because sometimes they have a day where they can really get into using the therapy, and there are other days where they're kind of distracted and they don't really want to be there. And so if you can be flexible with them, you get a lot more recovery or progress. Some can make marvelous progress, and some you're maintaining to keep them out of the hospital. I would call or look on websites and see who has interest in people with disabilities, and make sure they have the time they need to devote to the patient or the client that you're bringing in.
And what about Medicaid or Medicare?
Most of the clients that I see with disabilities are covered by Medicaid and Medicare. Now, and if you have Medicare, you have maybe more options. If you have Medicaid, and you have them both, your client should be well covered, or your patient, your family member should be well covered in therapy. Right now, they aren't putting any limitations on how many sessions you can have. So if someone's having a crisis week, you might see them twice or even 3 times, and then you might not need to except go back to weekly or bi-weekly. These guys also do really well in groups. They learn from each other, and they seem to pick up the business of therapy when doing groups. And I would encourage people to look for a group for your loved one or your client.
How would you find a group? Would that be through a therapist?
It would be through a therapist. You can always encourage a therapist to start one if they have a few patients or a few clients. I would guess that still through the mental health center, they run some groups, and through the through Aware maybe they would run some groups. But I think if we kind of prevail upon the case managers to be thinking of what clients might do well in a group, we could probably have more groups running. Those groups are not the standard group. They probably would run 45 minutes to an hour. Ideally, doing it twice a week, there's a lot more continuity, but if that can't happen, once a week works fairly well. Collaboration, again, with the people who are taking care or supporting these clients is really important, because you don't always hear today what happened 3 days ago, which might have been quite a crisis. I honestly don't know of anyone specific who's out there. I'm sure there are people that handle calls from people with disabilities, but if we went on some websites and we looked around, I bet we would find some people that were willing. If someone is interested in doing it, I'd be happy to share whatever I know that the clients have taught me over the last 30 years to get some more people interested in working with this population. They're usually very consistent. They show up because they have people who are bringing them, or they really want to be there. So I would encourage people to think about it. So people with disabilities are just like the rest of us. They fall in love, they have difficult relationships, they have trouble at work, they have trouble at home, they sometimes don't know how to navigate it, but they're just like the rest of us, and they really respond in a similar way. It just sometimes takes a little different route. You have to go in a different direction. It's absolutely key to working with a client. Otherwise, you will, and this is maybe why a lot of therapists haven't thought about working with the disabled. You're out there kind of alone with them, and all you have is that 45-minute hour session, and all you have is what the client is presenting. And maybe not because they don't want you to know, but because it doesn't seem important today when it was important yesterday. And so if you have the family involved, you have their support staff involved, you have their agencies involved, you get much better progress, and the therapist gets a lot of support for having the other people involved.